It was supposed to be the happiest day of my son's life. His wedding day. I stood there at the back of the grand hall looking at him in his tuxedo. The man he had become was standing at the altar, about to commit to the woman he loved. His smile shone brighter than the lights above. He looked so sure, so confident. And there she was, Emily, standing beside him, wearing the dress of every bride's dream. The soft fabric glowed under the soft lighting of the hall, making her look like a queen. She had always been a beautiful woman, and I thought she was perfect for my son. I was proud of the man he had chosen to marry. I had supported them both every step of the way. But as I stood there, watching their union unfold, a knot began to tighten in my stomach. I had no idea that in just a few moments, everything I had built up in my heart would come crashing down. As I watched them, I felt a sense of overwhelming pride for my son. He had worked so hard to get where he was, to find a woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. I had done everything I could to make their wedding day perfect. From the venue to the food to the entertainment, everything had been organized down to the smallest detail. I had put in hours of work, money, and effort into this day because I loved him. I wanted to give him a wedding that he would remember for the rest of his life. But little did I know, he would remember this day for reasons I could never have imagined. The ceremony began. The guests were all sitting, watching, waiting. The soft murmur of excitement filled the room, and I was quietly proud of the way everything was coming together. This was the moment my son had dreamed of, and I could see the love in his eyes as he looked at Emily. I was about to stand up to give a toast. A speech from a mother who loved her son deeply. I had prepared something heartfelt, something that would make everyone smile. I imagined it would be the perfect moment. But as soon as I stood, I saw Emily's face change. There was a coldness in her eyes, a look that I could not quite place. Her smile faded and my heart sank. I had spent so much time thinking about how happy this day would make her, and yet now she was looking at me as though I was the enemy. My son, standing there beside her, noticed nothing. He smiled at me, gesturing for me to speak. He had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking slightly, and began my speech. I looked at my son, and my voice caught in my throat as I tried to hold back the tears. But before I could get too far into the speech, I noticed Emily's expression become more and more severe. It was as if she was fighting something inside herself. Without warning, she stood up. Everyone turned toward her, confused. "Mom," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "You need to leave." My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to freeze. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The room went quiet, and every eye in the hall turned toward me. My son looked at her, then at me, a look of confusion and shock washing over his face. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't understand the depth of the situation. But I did. The words echoed in my mind. "You need to leave." My own flesh and blood had just told me to leave my son's wedding. I looked at her, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it. I had been the one to put everything together. I had spent months organizing, preparing, and paying for this wedding. I had worked tirelessly to make sure everything went perfectly for my son and the woman he loved. And now, after all of that, she was telling me to leave. I stood there, frozen, my mind trying to process what was happening. The guests were murmuring in confusion. Some looked shocked, some looked uncomfortable, but no one said a word. My son, still standing beside Emily, looked between us, clearly bewildered. He looked at me, then at her, as if trying to understand what was going on. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to ask why. But the words wouldn't come. My throat felt dry, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but I stayed silent. I couldn't let my emotions take over. Not yet. Instead, I simply nodded, turned, and walked out. I left the room without a word, without a look back. My heart was heavy with the weight of betrayal. My son didn't try to stop me. He didn't chase after me. He stood there silently, as if he didn't know what to do. As I walked out of the hall, the cold air hit me. I could feel my anger building inside me. How dare she? How dare she treat me like this? After everything I had done for them for this wedding, she wanted me gone. I wasn't just going to walk away and let her get away with this. No, I wouldn't allow it. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding and my thoughts were racing. What had just happened? What had she said? I kept hearing her voice in my head. You need to leave. I took a deep breath and wiped the tears from my eyes. There was no way I could just let this go. No way I could let my son's happiness be ruined by someone who didn't respect me, who didn't appreciate the sacrifices I had made. I had worked too hard for this and I had given too much. I wasn't going to let Emily tear my family apart. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. I need everything cancelled, I said, my voice low and steady. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the dress. All of it. Cancel everything. It was the only way. If Emily thought she could humiliate me in front of everyone, she was wrong. I would make sure she regretted it. As the days passed, the anger inside me only grew. I knew it was time for me to take control of the situation. I had worked so hard to make this day perfect, and now it was time for me to show everyone just how far I was willing to go to protect my family. And that's when I made the decision. I was going to cancel everything. Every single thing I had planned and paid for would be erased. Emily would learn that you don't treat people like that, especially not family. She would learn that actions have consequences. I was done being the quiet, loving mother. I wasn't going to sit by and let someone destroy my family. I was going to fight back. And when everything unfolded, when the truth came out, Emily would be the one left reeling. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about respect, about loyalty, and about standing up for what I believed in. And what I believed in was protecting my family, no matter the cost. So I prepared. I prepared for what was to come. And the world would soon see just how far I would go to teach Emily the lesson she so desperately needed to learn. The air in the grand hall was thick with anticipation. It was the day my son, Jake, was getting married. Every detail had been carefully planned. Each choice made with love and precision. From the flowers to the food, from the seating arrangement to the music, I had done it all. This was my gift to him, the perfect wedding. I wanted everything to be flawless. Jake was always such a good boy. As a child, he was thoughtful, kind, and always willing to help anyone in need. I had raised him to believe in loyalty, love, and the importance of family. When he told me he had found the woman he wanted to spend his life with, I couldn't have been happier. Emily was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed to share the same values that Jake had been raised with. I was excited to welcome her into our family. Everything felt right. I stood at the back of the room, watching Jake stand at the altar. The room was filled with people, some family, some friends, all there to witness the moment my son would begin his new life. He looked stunning, dressed in his tailored tuxedo, his eyes shining with happiness. Beside him, Emily stood gracefully in her wedding dress, her smile wide and bright, radiating beauty. She looked like she belonged there, like she was the perfect match for Jake. I smiled to myself. This was everything I had imagined for him. I had dreamed of this day ever since he was a little boy. The day he would find someone to love, someone to spend the rest of his life with. This was supposed to be a moment of joy, a day to celebrate love. But as I stood there, I felt a tightening in my chest. It wasn't from nerves or excitement, no. It was something else. A feeling I couldn't explain. Something was off. The air felt heavy, thick with an emotion I couldn't place. I tried to push it away. After all, this was Jake's big day. This was a moment of happiness. I wasn't going to let anything ruin it. I had helped plan every little detail of this wedding, and now it was time for me to speak. I had prepared a speech, one that would convey how proud I was of my son, how much I loved him, and how happy I was that he had found someone like Emily. I knew this moment was important to him, and I wanted to make sure he felt the love and support I had for him. I waited for the right moment. The officiant had just asked if anyone objected to the marriage. No one did, of course. The ceremony was moving along smoothly. The guests were quietly watching, waiting for the next part. I stood up, my heart swelling with pride. But as I rose to my feet, something changed. I noticed it first in Emily's face. Her smile faded just slightly, but enough for me to notice. Her eyes narrowed, her posture stiffened. It wasn't the look of a happy bride. It was something else. Something cold. I hesitated. Was I imagining it? I glanced at Jake. He was smiling at Emily, clearly lost in the moment. There was no indication on his face that anything was wrong. I took a deep breath and tried to ignore the unsettling feeling in my gut. I began my speech, my voice filled with warmth. I told them how proud I was of Jake, how much joy I felt seeing him start this new chapter in his life. I spoke of the love I had for him, how I had watched him grow from a boy into a man I was proud of. My words were meant to lift them up, to celebrate their union. But before I could finish, I saw Emily's lips move. She stood up suddenly, cutting me off mid-sentence. The room fell silent as she looked at me with a cold, hard gaze. Froze. What was happening? "Mom," she said, her voice loud and clear, but somehow detached, as if it were rehearsed. "You need to leave." The words sliced through the air like a knife. My heart stopped. I felt the blood rush to my head, and a dizzying wave of disbelief washed over me. Did I hear her right? Was she really asking me to leave my own son's wedding? For a moment, I didn't know how to react. The room was silent. Every pair of eyes was on me. I looked around, searching for someone to explain what was happening, but everyone was frozen, unsure of what to say. My son, Jake, stood there beside Emily, looking confused. He didn't understand what was happening. I looked at Emily and then at my son. There was a look on Jake's face I had never seen before. It wasn't the look of joy I had expected. It was confusion mixed with a hint of something else. Disappointment. Disbelief. I couldn't tell. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask why, to demand an explanation. But the words didn't come. It was as if my voice had been stolen from me. My mind raced. I had given everything to make this day perfect for them. I had spent hours planning, organizing, paying for every last detail. And now, after all of that, she was asking me to leave. I stood there, my chest tight, my throat dry. I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I wouldn't let them. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Not after everything I had done. I took a step back, my heart breaking, and then another. Slowly, I turned and walked toward the exit. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. What was there to say? I left the room, the whispers following me. The doors closed behind me, and the sound of the wedding celebration faded into the distance. My mind was reeling. I had been humiliated. I had just been told to leave my son's wedding by the woman he was about to marry. I stumbled out into the cool air, feeling a lump form in my throat. I wanted to scream, to shout at the injustice of it all, but I didn't. I walked to my car, my legs shaky, my mind still trying to process what had just happened. I started the engine and drove away. The tears came then, unbidden, as the anger rose in my chest. How dare she? How dare Emily treat me like this? After everything I had done for them, after everything I had sacrificed, she had the nerve to tell me to leave. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white. There was only one thought in my mind. I would not let this go. Couldn't. She had crossed a line, and now I would make sure she understood just how much she had hurt me. There would be consequences. I wasn't going to sit by and let my son's happiness be stolen from me by someone who didn't appreciate everything I had done for them. Well, this was far from over. And what I did next would shock her in ways she never expected. I drove in a daze, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me with every mile. The world outside seemed blurry, as if I were watching it through a fog. I barely registered the passing streetlights or the hum of the car's engine. All I could hear in my mind was Emily's voice, sharp, cold, and unwavering. "You need to leave." It repeated over and over again, like an echo in my head, bouncing off the walls of my mind. I couldn't understand why she had done it. Why she had chosen that moment, of all moments, to humiliate me. And worse still, why had Jake stood by and said nothing? Didn't he see the hurt in my eyes? Didn't he understand the depth of my loyalty to him? The years of love, the sacrifices I had made to make his life easier, to support him in every way I could. How could he just stand there? I gripped the steering wheel harder, my knuckles turning white. The tears had stopped flowing, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. It was almost like a fire that had been kindled inside of me, and I couldn't put it out. Every time I thought about what had happened, it reignited, stronger and fiercer. My son, my flesh and blood, had allowed this. He had let Emily treat me like an outsider in my own family. The woman he was about to marry had just thrown me out like I didn't matter. And he had done nothing to stop it. It was as if he had agreed with her. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. My own son had chosen her over me. Over everything I had done for him. I didn't know where I was driving. It didn't matter. I needed space. I needed time to think, to plan what I was going to do next. What was my next step? What was the best way to make her understand the cost of disrespecting me? And what was I going to do about Jake? I didn't want to believe that Jake could have sided with Emily. He had always been a mama's boy, always turned to me for advice, for comfort. He had always been close to me. At least that's what I thought. But now, in this moment, I was filled with doubt. I didn't recognize him anymore. Was he just pretending all those years, or had Emily somehow changed him? I didn't know, but I had to find out. I pulled into a parking lot and stopped the car. My hands still gripped the wheel, but I didn't move. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my mind swirling with questions and thoughts that refused to settle. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. Had to stay calm. I had to make a decision. I couldn't let this go. There had to be consequences. Emily had to pay for this humiliation, for making me feel small. But what could I do? How could I make her understand the weight of what she had done? How could I make Jake see that he had made a mistake by choosing her over me? Then it hit me. The wedding. Plans. The money I had invested in it. I had paid for almost everything. The entire event was a gift to them. It was meant to be a celebration, a day they would remember forever. But now, it was just a painful reminder of what had happened. The thought of how Emily had treated me made my blood boil. Well, I wouldn't let her have it. I wouldn't let her have this day, this wedding. Not after the way she had treated me. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. Cancel everything, I said, my voice low but filled with resolve. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the dress, everything. I want it all stopped. No more wedding. No more plans. Cancel it all. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before the lawyer responded. Are you sure about this? You know how much has already been paid for, right? I don't care, I snapped. I'm done. I want it all cancelled. The lawyer hesitated, then sighed. Understood. I'll make the arrangements. It'll take a few days, but I'll get it done. I hung up the phone without another word. The decision had been made. I wasn't going to let Emily and Jake walk away from this day thinking they had won. I wasn't going to sit by and let her get away with treating me like this. She needed to learn that actions had consequences. She needed to learn that no one could treat me like that and get away with it. I started the car again, my heart still racing, but a sense of clarity filling me. This wasn't just about the wedding. It wasn't just about the money or the event. It was about respect. It was about showing Emily that I wasn't someone she could just push around. It was about showing Jake that he couldn't disregard the person who had always been there for him, who had given everything for him. I drove back home, my mind still turning over what I had just done. I had cancelled the wedding, but what would that do? Would it make Emily regret her actions? Would Jake understand why I had done it? I didn't know the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be disrespected. I wasn't going to let them continue with their lives as if nothing had happened. I would make them see. I would make them understand the price of betraying me. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the next few hours pacing around my home. My mind was racing. I couldn't shake the image of my son standing there, so passive, letting Emily humiliate me in front of everyone. I had spent so much time, so much effort making their wedding perfect. And yet, in one swift moment, it had all come crashing down. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't simply walk away and pretend it didn't happen. The weight of that humiliation hung heavy around my neck like a chain I couldn't escape. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's cold expression, and every time I tried to speak to Jake about it, his reaction was distant, like he was on her side. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The sun was beginning to set, the sky filled with the soft hues of orange and purple. But there was no peace in my heart. The betrayal still burned, still gnawed at me. I had always known that marriage was supposed to be a bond, a partnership between two people, but in that moment, I felt like an outsider. I needed to make them understand. I needed to make them see that their actions had consequences. I had done nothing but love and support Jake, and this was how I was treated. I couldn't let them just walk away as if nothing had happened. The wedding was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Happy day for both of them. But it had turned into something else entirely. A day of humiliation. A day that would live in my memory forever. I wasn't just going to sit back and allow them to have their happily ever after. Not after what she had done to me. I had worked too hard, spent too much, and poured too much of myself into making sure they had everything they needed. And Emily, the woman my son had chosen to spend his life with, had treated me like a stranger, nuisance, problem. And now she wanted to erase me from their lives. Well, it wasn't going to happen. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jake's number. It rang for a moment before he answered. His voice, normally warm and comforting, now sounded distant, like he was already starting to push me away. "Mom, hey, what's going on?" he asked, his tone guarded. I could feel my blood beginning to boil. I took a deep breath and forced myself to remain calm. I didn't want to shout at him. I didn't want to lose control. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Jake, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm but not angry. "Not yet. I need to know what happened. Why did you let her treat me like that?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him shifting in his chair, the sound of him taking a breath before he spoke again. "Mom, I told you she's just stressed. It's a big day. You have to understand that. She didn't mean it like that." I could feel the tears rising in my throat. I fought them back, not wanting him to hear how hurt I was. "Jake, she humiliated me in front of everyone. She told me to leave. She told me I wasn't welcome. And you just stood there. You said nothing. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I've done everything for you. Everything." His voice softened a little. "Mom, I didn't know what to do. It was her day too, and I didn't want to cause any problems." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, Jake. It is like that. You don't get it. You don't see it. She has no respect for me and you let it happen. You let her disrespect your mother. And that, my son, is something I can never forgive." There was another long pause. I could hear him sigh, and I knew he was trying to figure out how to fix things. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The betrayal was already in motion. "I need time, Mom," Jake said quietly. "This is a lot for me to process." "Time," I scoffed. "Time for what?" "To forget what happened. To forget how she treated me. You don't get to choose when I'm hurt. You don't get to make that decision for me. I'm not making decisions for you, Mom. I'm just trying to figure things out. I'll call you later, okay?" I didn't respond. I just hung up. I couldn't talk to him anymore. Not right now. Not when I was so filled with anger. I stared at my phone for a moment before throwing it down on the table. What was happening? Was my son really choosing her over me? Was that the man I had raised? Was I really so insignificant that he couldn't even defend me against his future wife? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept it. But the truth was staring me right in the face. And that truth was that my son was slipping away from me. I had given him everything. And now it felt like I was losing him. Not just to her but to everything she represented. The woman who had come into our lives, taken him away from me, and now treated me like an outsider. The woman who had ruined his wedding ruined everything I had worked for, and was now trying to erase me from their lives. I stood up from the chair and walked toward the window, looking out at the quiet street once again. The same street that had always been my safe place, my sanctuary. But now it seemed distant, far away, like nothing could ever be the same again. The feeling of betrayal still hung heavy in my chest. But now I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. I had given her everything. I had planned her wedding, helped her with every detail, and yet she had treated me like dirt. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let that happen. It was time to take control. It was time to show them just how far I was willing to go to make sure they knew the consequences of their actions. I wasn't going to let Emily or Jake think they could walk all over me. I had spent too long building everything for them, and now it was time for me to make sure they paid the price. And when it was all over, they would understand just how much they had underestimated me. The days that followed were filled with a tense silence. The phone calls stopped coming. Jake didn't reach out, and neither did Emily. I didn't know whether to feel relief or more resentment. The silence spoke volumes. It was as if they were waiting for me to cave in, to apologize for something that wasn't my fault. But I wasn't going to back down. I had made my decision, and I was going to follow through. I spent my time planning. I didn't need to ask for help. I had been the one who organized everything up until that point. I had seen how the wedding plans had been executed down to the smallest detail. I knew what had been paid for, what had been promised, and what was still in motion. And I knew how to cancel it all. I sat at my desk, my fingers moving over the papers, making the calls that would undo everything. The venue, the caterers, the florists, the musicians, the photographers, all of it. Everything I had worked so hard to put together was now being ripped apart, piece by piece. The wedding was not going to happen. Not on my watch. With each call I felt a strange satisfaction. This was how I was going to make Emily feel the weight of her actions. She thought she could treat me like a nobody, but I would show her just how far I could go. I was the one who had given everything to make her wedding day perfect, and now I was the one who could take it all away. I wasn't doing this just for the satisfaction. I wasn't just doing it to hurt her. I was doing it to make them both realize the cost of betrayal. They needed to understand that their actions had consequences. I had spent my life building everything for Jake, and now it felt like he was turning his back on me for her. I needed him to see just how much he stood to lose. After I finished canceling the vendors, I felt a small sense of victory, but there was still something missing. I had taken away the wedding. I had taken away their dream day. But it wasn't enough. I still had this anger inside me, this fire that wouldn't be extinguished. I needed to do something else. Something that would make them feel the full weight of their disrespect. That night, I sat down at my computer and began drafting a letter. It was a letter that would expose everything. It was a letter that would leave no room for misinterpretation. I wasn't just going to cancel the wedding. I was going to take back the power. I was going to remind them both who I was, who I had been to Jake, and how much I had given to make their lives easier. I wrote about the years I had spent raising him, the sacrifices I had made to give him everything he needed. I reminded them of the love I had shown, the countless hours I had spent making sure they had the best, the most beautiful wedding day. And now, here I was being treated like I didn't matter, like I was nothing. The letter wasn't just a list of complaints. It wasn't just a rant about how I had been treated. It was a statement, declaration. It was my way of reminding them of the bond we had once shared. It was my way of showing them that no matter how far they tried to push me away, I would never forget the love and loyalty I had shown. Once the letter was finished, I felt a strange sense of calm. It was as if the weight on my shoulders had lifted slightly. But the anger was still there, still burning. I was ready to send it. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen for a moment, then hit send. The moment the letter left my inbox, I knew things would change. I'd crossed a line. There was no going back. They would read it. they would understand just how deeply they had hurt me. And maybe, just maybe, they would start to see the cost of their actions. The next day I received a phone call. It wasn't from Jake. It wasn't from Emily. It was from the wedding planner. "Hello," the planner said. "We've received the notice of cancellation for the wedding." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened, knowing that what she was about to say would be the beginning of the end. "We're in the process of notifying everyone," she continued. "But I have to ask, are you sure about this? It's a lot of money, a lot of effort. Are you absolutely sure?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm sure." There was a pause, then a reluctant sigh from the other end. "Understood. We'll proceed with the cancellations as requested." The conversation ended soon after, but I didn't feel any sense of relief. I didn't feel like I had one. Not yet. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. But now they would understand. Now they would know just how far I was willing to go to make them realize the consequences of their disrespect. I didn't hear from Jake or Emily that day. Or the next. It wasn't until 2 days later that I got a call from my son. His voice was strained, tired. "Mom," he said, his tone distant. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when Jake would finally see what he had done. "Course, Jake," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We can talk." He sighed. "I don't know where to start. I've been trying to figure this out. But I feel like you don't understand." I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was starting to get it. Maybe this was the turning point. But I didn't want to get my hopes up just yet. "I understand more than you think," I replied. "I understand that I've been disrespected. I understand that after everything I've done for you, I was treated like I didn't matter." Jake fell silent for a moment. I could hear him sigh, and I knew he was trying to find the right words, but there was nothing left to say. The damage had been done. The betrayal was already in motion. "I don't want to fight with you, Mom," he said quietly. "I don't want to lose you." And that was when I realized that the battle wasn't just about Emily anymore. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about Jake. It was about the relationship we had once shared. And I wasn't sure if that relationship could be repaired. I had taken everything from them. I had canceled the wedding, taken back the power, and sent the letter that laid bare everything I had done for them. But now, it was clear that the road to healing wouldn't be easy. The next few days would be critical. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Emily walk away from this unscathed. And I wasn't going to let Jake forget the lesson he needed to learn. Days passed with the heaviness of unspoken words hanging between Jake and me. The silence felt unbearable. Each time I thought of him, of how he stood there, doing nothing to defend me, it made my heart ache. I had given so much to him, and this was how I was repaid. I had never felt more alone, even though he was still my son. It was as if everything we had shared had been erased in an instant, replaced by the woman he had chosen. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It wasn't just about Emily. It was about a relationship that had been torn apart by betrayal, by silence. I had spent years building a bond with my son, a bond that was supposed to be unbreakable. But in that moment, it had shattered. And no amount of apologies, no matter how many times Jake called to say he was sorry, could fix that. The phone calls became less frequent. Jake would check in, his voice sounding distant, as if he were afraid to truly confront what had happened. I could feel him pulling away, the distance between us growing with each passing day. Every time we spoke, it felt like he was just going through the motions. He was sorry, yes, but it wasn't the kind of apology that healed the wounds. It wasn't the kind of apology that made me feel like I mattered. I couldn't stand the way things were. I couldn't live with the emptiness that now occupied our relationship. I had to make him understand. I had to make him realize that actions have consequences. The anger still burned inside me, but it was no longer just anger. It was a cold determination, a resolve to make things right in my own way. Emily had caused this. Emily had driven the wedge between me and my son. And I wasn't going to let her win. I started to make plans. More than just legal action. More than just canceling the wedding. It was time to take control of my life again. To show Jake that no matter how far he tried to push me away, I would not be silenced. I would not be dismissed. I had done too much for him, and I wasn't going to stand by and let him forget that. I arranged a meeting with the lawyer, this time to discuss something more personal. I was going to make sure that Emily would never forget how she had treated me. She had taken everything from me. My dignity, my pride, and most of all my relationship with Jake. It was time for me to take something back. Something that mattered. The lawyer listened carefully as I laid out my plan. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about the wedding. It was about something far more important. It was about respect. It was about making sure that Emily and Jake understood the consequences of their actions. I knew Jake had never fully understood the weight of what had happened. He was still wrapped up in his guilt, still trying to make things right with Emily. But what about me? What about the mother who had raised him, who had given everything to ensure his happiness? What about the years I had spent shaping his life, teaching him right from wrong, supporting him through thick and thin? I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to stand by and watch my son forget the lessons he had been taught. I wasn't going to let Emily manipulate him into thinking that I didn't matter. The plan I made with the lawyer was simple, but it would be effective. It would be a reminder to both of them that actions have consequences, that love and loyalty cannot be taken for granted. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them walk away without paying the price. That night I sent another message to Jake. This time it was short, but it was clear. I wanted him to meet me. I wanted him to hear me, to understand that I wasn't just angry. I was hurt, deeply hurt. I wasn't going to beg for his love. I wasn't going to beg for his attention. But I needed him to understand that things couldn't go back to how they were. I waited, and the hours dragged on. Finally, I received his response. He agreed to meet. The relief was fleeting, but it gave me the chance to speak the truth. To let him know how much I had been hurt. How much this had all affected me. We met at the same cafe where we had spoken weeks before. This time I was determined to stand my ground. I wasn't going to let him apologize and brush everything under the rug. I wasn't going to let him dismiss my feelings. I deserved more than that. I deserved respect, and I was going to make sure I got it. Jake arrived a little late, and as he walked in, I could see the same sadness in his eyes. The same uncertainty. But this time it wasn't just guilt. It was something else. Something deeper. He sat across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. He didn't speak. He just waited for me to start. And I did. Jake, I began, my voice steady, but with a weight behind it. You have no idea what this has done to me. What she has done to me. I gave everything for you, Jake. Everything. And you let her throw me out. You let her tell me to leave. You did nothing. And that has torn me apart. I could see the pain in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. He wasn't truly hearing me. He was still wrapped up in his guilt, still trying to protect her. And it hurt me more than anything. He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. I wasn't going to let him say the same things over and over again. I wasn't going to let him apologize in the same empty way. No, Jake, I said, my voice firm. This isn't about her. This isn't about me forgiving you. This is about you understanding what you've lost. This is about me making sure that you never forget how much I have done for you. You don't get to walk away from this, from me, and think it's all going to be okay. He looked down, the weight of my words hitting him hard. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to fix this. And the truth was, I didn't know if it could be fixed. But I wasn't going to stand by and let him forget. I wasn't going to let him believe that he could choose her over me and think there wouldn't be consequences. I stood up, ready to leave. But before I did, I looked him in the eyes one last time. You've made your choice, Jake. But don't forget who was here for you when no one else was. Don't forget who loved you when it mattered most. And with that I walked out. The days after my conversation with Jake were filled with a quiet emptiness. It was as if everything had changed but nothing had truly shifted. I had poured my heart out to him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he still didn't understand. He had heard my words, yes, but the weight of them seemed to fall on deaf ears. I knew it wasn't just about the words I had spoken, but about the actions that had been taken. Actions that had shattered the trust between us. I didn't expect an immediate change. I didn't expect Jake to wake up and suddenly realize the magnitude of what he had done. But I did expect something more than the silence that followed. I had done everything for him. I had been there for him when he needed me. And now I was being pushed aside, replaced by a woman who didn't care about the sacrifices I had made. It felt like betrayal in its purest form. Emily had taken my son from me, and Jake had let it happen. He had stood by and allowed her to erase me from his life. And that was something I could never forgive. I spent the next few days focused on my plan, knowing that I had already taken one step too far for things to go back to normal. I had cancelled the wedding, sent the letter, and now I was making sure Emily and Jake would feel the full weight of their actions. But something still gnawed at me. Despite all that had happened, despite the anger and the hurt, there was still a small part of me that longed for the bond we had shared. A part of me that wanted things to go back to how they were before. But I knew that was impossible. I had already crossed a line, and so had they. There was no going back. That evening, I found myself sitting in front of the fireplace, the soft crackling of the wood filling the silence. The house felt too quiet, too empty without the sound of Jake's laughter or the warmth of his presence. It was in these moments, when I was alone with my thoughts, that the weight of the situation truly hit me. I had lost my son. And it wasn't just because of Emily. It was because of his choices. I could feel my heart breaking again, but there was no time for tears. There was no time to wallow in self-pity. This was a fight I had to win. For myself. For the years I had spent raising him. I wasn't going to let him forget what he had lost. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out the documents my lawyer had prepared. I had given them a final chance, a chance to make things right. But if they couldn't see the damage they had caused, then it was time to make them understand the cost. The documents outlined everything. The legal actions I was taking to ensure that Emily would never be able to manipulate my son again. The arrangements I was making to secure my place in his life. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was about showing them both that they couldn't just walk away from me and expect no consequences. The plan was simple but effective. I wasn't going to let them think they could do whatever they wanted, hurt whoever they wanted, and just move on without feeling the repercussions. Emily had crossed the line, and Jake had allowed it. Now, it was my turn to make them realize the magnitude of their mistake. I made a few more calls, finalizing the last details. I wasn't going to stop until they both understood just how much they had hurt me, how much they had taken from me. I had given them everything, and they had taken it all for granted. They had taken my love, my support, my time, and my energy, and they had thrown it away. The phone rang again, and this time it was Jake. My stomach twisted, and I hesitated for a moment before answering. I didn't want to speak to him, not when the words I had spoken to him earlier still hung between us. But I knew I had to. "Mom," he said softly, his voice shaky. "I think we need to talk again." I didn't respond immediately. What was there to say? What could he possibly say that would make this any better? But I knew that I couldn't keep avoiding the conversation forever. We had to address this. It was either now or never. "Jake," I said, my voice steady but firm. "We've already talked, Jake. You've heard me. You know what I'm feeling. Can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like everything is okay." "I know, Mom," he replied. "I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. But I don't know how to fix this." "It's not just about fixing it, Jake," I said, my voice catching slightly. "It's about you understanding the consequences of your actions. You chose her over me. And now, I have to live with the fact that my son has turned his back on me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything. He didn't have anything to say. And I didn't know if that was worse than the words he could have spoken. "Jake," I continued, my voice breaking for the first time, "I gave everything for you. I put so much into your life, into your future. And this is how I'm treated. You can't just expect everything to go back to normal. Doesn't work like that. He sighed, a deep, exhausted sound. I know, Mom, I know. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to fix this. There's nothing to fix, Jake. The damage is done. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you've done. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. I hung up the phone without another word. The weight of it all settled on me like a heavy blanket. I had said everything I needed to say. Jake had heard me. But I knew he wasn't ready to understand. Maybe he would never be ready. I sat down at my desk again, looking at the documents. I had done everything I could. Now it was up to them to make the next move. I wasn't going to chase after them. I wasn't going to beg them to see the error of their ways. If they couldn't recognize what they had done to me, then I was done. The phone rang again, but this time it was Emily. And this time, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what she had to say. I didn't expect a call from Emily. Not after everything that had happened. But when the phone rang and her name appeared on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. I could feel the anger rising again, bubbling just beneath the surface. I wasn't sure if I was ready to speak to her, to face her again after all the hurt, but I knew I couldn't avoid it. Not anymore. The silence between us had stretched for days, but now she was reaching out. I didn't know if that meant she was coming to apologize, or if she was coming to make more excuses. I didn't know if I cared anymore. But I knew that if I picked up the phone, I would have to be prepared. Prepared for whatever she was going to say, for whatever game she was playing now. I took a deep breath before answering. I'm sorry, she began. Her voice soft but not sincere enough to hide the underlying coldness. I know things have been tense. I just wanted to clear the air. Clear the air. It was almost laughable. How could she think she could just smooth everything over with a few words? How could she think I would simply forgive her for everything? For treating me like I didn't matter, for stripping away everything I had built for my son, for not standing up for me when I needed him the most. I didn't respond immediately. I just listened, my heart pounding. I needed to hear her out. I needed to see if she had any real remorse, or if this was just another attempt to manipulate the situation. Look, she continued, I know I've hurt you. I never meant for it to go this far. But Jake and I are trying to figure things out. It's been a lot for him, and he doesn't know how to handle everything. He's upset with you, but I think if you just give it some time, things will settle down. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how selfish she was, how she had destroyed everything. But I held my ground. I had to remain calm. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I've given everything for you and Jake, I said, my voice steady but with the hurt creeping in. And you think that some time will make this all better? You think you can just erase what you've done? You don't get to come here and say things like that. Not after everything you've taken from me. She was silent for a moment, and in that silence, I could hear the guilt creeping into her voice. But instead of backing down, she pressed on. I know you feel hurt, but this is hard for Jake too. You're not the only one who's been affected. He's struggling. He doesn't know what to do. But I'm trying to make things work. Trying to make things work. I could hear the words in my mind, each one a reminder of everything she had taken. She hadn't come to apologize. She hadn't come to make amends. She was justifying her actions, excusing everything she had done. I wasn't going to let her off the hook. Not this time. Jake made a choice, I said firmly. He made a choice to stand by you, and he chose you over me. And I can't just let that go. I can't just act like everything is fine when you've disrespected me in the worst way possible. She sighed, the sound of frustration in her breath. I don't know what you want me to say, she muttered. I can't change what happened. All I can do is try to move forward. Move forward. The words hit me like a slap to the face. There was no moving forward for me. Not yet. Not while the wounds were still fresh. There was no moving forward when the person who should have been standing by my side had turned his back on me, and the woman who had come into our lives had disrespected me beyond belief. I'll never forgive you for this, I said quietly. And I'll never forgive Jake. Not for what he did to me. You've both hurt me beyond measure. The line went silent again. Emily didn't respond. And for a moment, I wondered if I had finally made her realize the depth of the pain she had caused. But the silence didn't last long. "We'll see how things go," she said softly. "I'm just trying to keep things together." I wasn't interested in keeping things together. Not anymore. I wasn't interested in pretending that everything was going to be okay. I couldn't go back to how things were. I couldn't act like nothing had happened. "You've already destroyed everything," I told her. "And there's no going back from this." And with that I ended the call. I stared at my phone for a long time, the weight of the conversation sinking in. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anything but emptiness. I had confronted her. I had said what I needed to say. But the pain still remained. The betrayal still stung. And I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The following days were even quieter. Jake didn't reach out. Emily didn't call. It was as if the world had frozen. I spent my days reflecting, processing, trying to come to terms with the fact that I had lost my son. Not to her, but to the choices he had made. I had done everything for him. Everything. And now he was slipping away. No amount of apologies, no amount of words could fix what had been broken. I tried to focus on something else. Myself. On rebuilding my life without them. But it wasn't easy. The void they left was too big. The hurt too deep. I spent hours pacing the house, replaying every moment in my mind. The wedding. The rejection. The silence. It all led to this. A breaking point I couldn't undo. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't going to wait for Jake to come back. I wasn't going to wait for Emily to realize the damage she had caused. I wasn't going to sit idly by and hope things would get better. It was time to take back control. It was time to stop waiting for apologies that would never come. I was done letting them dictate my life. I was done living in the past. And the only way forward was to make them see that no one could treat me like this and expect nothing in return. It was time to make them understand the cost of betrayal. The days after my conversation with Jake were filled with a quiet emptiness. It was as if everything had changed but nothing had truly shifted. I had poured my heart out to him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he still didn't understand. He had heard my words, yes, but the weight of them seemed to fall on deaf ears. I knew it wasn't just about the words I had spoken, but about the actions that had been taken. Actions that had shattered the trust between us. I didn't expect an immediate change. I didn't expect Jake to wake up and suddenly realize the magnitude of what he had done. But I did expect something more than the silence that followed. I had done everything for him. I had been there for him when he needed me. And now I was being pushed aside, replaced by a woman who didn't care about the sacrifices I had made. It felt like betrayal in its purest form. Emily had taken my son from me, and Jake had let it happen. He had stood by and allowed her to erase me from his life. And that was something I could never forgive. I spent the next few days focused on my plan, knowing that I had already taken one step too far for things to go back to normal. I had cancelled the wedding, sent the letter. And now I was making sure Emily and Jake would feel the full weight of their actions. But something still gnawed at me. Despite all that had happened, despite the anger and the hurt, there was still a small part of me that longed for the bond we had shared. A part of me that wanted things to go back to how they were before. But I knew that was impossible. I had already crossed a line, and so had they. There was no going back. That evening, I found myself sitting in front of the fireplace, the soft crackling of the wood filling the silence. The house felt too quiet, too empty without the sound of Jake's laughter or the warmth of his presence. It was in these moments, when I was alone with my thoughts, that the weight of the situation truly hit me. I had lost my son. And it wasn't just because of Emily. It was because of his choices. I could feel my heart breaking again, but there was no time for tears. There was no time to wallow in self-pity. This was a fight I had to win. For myself. For the years I had spent raising him. I wasn't going to let him forget what he had lost. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out the documents my lawyer had prepared. I had given them a final chance, a chance to make things right. But if they couldn't see the damage they had caused, then it was time to make them understand the cost. The documents outlined everything. The legal actions I was taking to ensure that Emily would never be able to manipulate my son again. The arrangements I was making to secure my place in his life. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was about showing them both that they couldn't just walk away from me and expect no consequences. The plan was simple but effective. I wasn't going to let them think they could do whatever they wanted, hurt whoever they wanted, and just move on without feeling the repercussions. Emily had crossed the line, and Jake had allowed it. Now, it was my turn to make them realize the magnitude of their mistake. That night I sent another message to Jake. This time it was short but it was clear. I wanted him to meet me. I wanted him to hear me, to understand that I wasn't just angry. I was hurt, deeply hurt. I wasn't going to beg for his love. I wasn't going to beg for his attention. But I needed him to understand that things couldn't go back to how they were. I waited, and the hours dragged on. Finally, I received his response. He agreed to meet. The relief was fleeting, but it gave me the chance to speak the truth. To let him know how much I had been hurt, how much this had all affected me. We met at the same cafe where we had spoken weeks before. This time I was determined to stand my ground. I wasn't going to let him apologize and brush everything under the rug. I wasn't going to let him dismiss my feelings. I deserved more than that. I deserved respect, and I was going to make sure I got it. Jake arrived a little late, and as he walked in, I could see the same sadness in his eyes, the same uncertainty. But this time it wasn't just guilt. It was something else, something deeper. He sat across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. He didn't speak. He just waited for me to start. And I did. Jake, I began, my voice steady, but with a weight behind it. You have no idea what this has done to me. What she has done to me. I gave everything for you, Jake. Everything. And you let her throw me out. You let her tell me to leave. You did nothing. And that has torn me apart. I could see the pain in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. He wasn't truly hearing me. He was still wrapped up in his guilt, still trying to protect her. And it hurt me more than anything. He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. I wasn't going to let him say the same things over and over again. I wasn't going to let him apologize in the same empty way. No, Jake, I said, my voice firm. This isn't about her. This isn't about me forgiving you. This is about you understanding what you've lost. This is about me making sure that you never forget how much I have done for you. You don't get to walk away from this, from me, and think it's all going to be okay. He looked down, the weight of my words hitting him hard. He didn't know what to say. And I wasn't going to give him the comfort of an easy answer. I've given everything for you, I continued, my voice softer now, but still firm. I've sacrificed more than you'll ever know. And this is how I'm treated. You can't just expect everything to go back to normal. Doesn't work like that. He leaned forward, his voice cracking. Sorry, Mom. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to fix this. I stood up abruptly. I'm done talking for now, Jake. You can think about what you've done. But I'm done being hurt. And I'm done letting you get away with it. I turned and walked out of the cafe, my heart heavy, but my resolve stronger than ever. I had made my decision, and now there was no turning back. Emily would face the consequences of her actions. And Jake would learn that you don't get to treat the people who love you like this and expect everything to go back to normal. Not anymore. The days that followed my meeting with Jake were filled with uncertainty. The silence between us had grown even deeper, a void that seemed to stretch on endlessly. I had told him what I needed to say, but the weight of those words had not yet sunk in. I wasn't sure if he even understood the gravity of what had been broken. I wasn't sure if he would ever understand. I thought I would feel some sort of relief after confronting him, but instead, all I felt was a heavy emptiness. I had spoken my truth, and I had done everything I could to make him see what he had done, but it was as if the space between us had only grown wider. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was no longer just about the wedding. It was about a relationship that had been torn apart beyond repair. The phone calls from Jake stopped. The texts, The brief messages apologizing for his behavior, all ceased. I had no way of knowing what he was thinking or how he was dealing with the mess he had created. I couldn't even bring myself to check on him anymore. I had made my decision. He had chosen her. And I had chosen myself. Emily, too, had remained silent. It was clear that she had her own way of dealing with things, and that way was to avoid the consequences of her actions as much as possible. She hadn't reached out to apologize, hadn't tried to fix the damage she had caused. She knew the power she held over Jake, and she wasn't about to let go of that easily. But I wasn't going to sit idly by while they continued their lives without facing the repercussions of what they had done. I had already made my move, already set everything in motion, and now I wasn't going to back down. I took a deep breath and turned to the pile of papers on my desk. There were still legal actions that needed to be taken, still pieces of the plan I had set in motion that needed to be completed. I had ensured that everything they had taken for granted would be stripped away. The money, the wedding, the future they had planned was all in jeopardy now. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the wedding. What mattered to me was making them see that they couldn't just walk away from the damage they had caused. They couldn't just take my son from me and expect no consequences. Emily had crossed the line, and Jake had let her. They needed to feel the weight of that decision. As I finalized the legal documents, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I was doing what needed to be done. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been lost. Something that might never be repaired. Bond. Love. A mother's devotion. The thought of Jake slipping away from me like this was unbearable. He had been my world, my reason for everything. And now, he was choosing someone who didn't even value the sacrifices I had made for him. I wasn't sure how to come to terms with that. A few days later I received a letter. It wasn't from Jake though. It was from his lawyer. The contents of the letter made my heart race. It was a formal notice. Jake and Emily were pressing charges against me. They were seeking legal action for interference in the wedding, for the money I had taken from them, and for the actions I had taken that had caused emotional distress. I read the letter over and over again, unable to believe what I was seeing. They were accusing me of interfering in their lives. They were accusing me of causing emotional distress. After everything they had done to me, they had the nerve to point the finger at me. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface exploded. I slammed the letter down on the desk, my hands trembling with fury. How dare they? How dare they try to turn this around and make me the villain in all of this? I had done nothing but love Jake. I had done nothing but give him everything. And now they were trying to destroy me further. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was just another part of their plan to get back at me. They were trying to make me feel guilty, trying to make me believe that I had done something wrong. But I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I had already lost so much. I wasn't going to lose myself too. I called my lawyer immediately. The conversation was brief, but the message was clear. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let them win. If they wanted to play this game, then I would make sure they felt the full force of my actions. The lawyer assured me that we would fight back, that I had done nothing wrong and that they were simply trying to retaliate. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to be over any time soon. And yet, despite everything, there was still a small part of me that hoped Jake would come to his senses, that he would realize the truth, that he would see what was really happening here. But deep down I knew that wasn't likely. He had made his choice, and he had made it clear that he was siding with her. I looked at the legal documents again, this time with a sense of finality. There was no going back from this. No more second chances. No more hoping that things would get better. It was time for me to take control of my life, to stand up for what I believed in, and to make them realize the true cost of their actions. I wasn't going to be the one who suffered in silence anymore. The days that followed my conversation with Jake were filled with uncertainty. The silence between us had grown even deeper, a void that seemed to stretch on endlessly. I had told him what I needed to say, but the weight of those words had not yet sunk in. I wasn't sure if he even understood the gravity of what had been broken. I wasn't sure if he would ever understand. I thought I would feel some sort of relief after confronting him, but instead, all I felt was a heavy emptiness. I had spoken my truth, and I had done everything I could to make him see what he had done, but it was as if the space between us had only grown wider. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was no longer just about the wedding. It was about a relationship that had been torn apart beyond repair. The phone calls from Jake stopped. The texts, the brief messages apologizing for his behavior, all ceased. I had no way of knowing what he was thinking or how he was dealing with the mess he had created. I couldn't even bring myself to check on him anymore. I had made my decision. He had chosen her. And I had chosen myself. Emily, too, had remained silent. It was clear that she had her own way of dealing with things, and that way was to avoid the consequences of her actions as much as possible. She hadn't reached out to apologize, hadn't tried to fix the damage she had caused. She knew the power she held over Jake, and she wasn't about to let go of that easily. But I wasn't going to sit idly by while they continued their lives without facing the repercussions of what they had done. I had already made my move, already set everything in motion, and now I wasn't going to back down. I took a deep breath and turned to the pile of papers on my desk. There were still legal actions that needed to be taken, still pieces of the plan I had set in motion that needed to be completed. I had ensured that everything they had taken for granted would be stripped away. The money, the wedding, the future they had planned. It was all in jeopardy now. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the wedding. What mattered to me was making them see that they couldn't just walk away from the damage they had caused. They couldn't just take my son from me and expect no consequences. Emily had crossed the line, and Jake had let her. Now, it was my turn to make them realize the magnitude of their mistake. As I finalized the legal documents, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I was doing what needed to be done. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been lost. Something that might never be repaired. Bond. Love. A mother's devotion. The phone rang again, and I almost didn't want to pick it up. I knew it was probably another call from the lawyer, updating me on the status of the case. But when I saw the number, I hesitated. It wasn't the lawyer. It was Jake. I took a deep breath before answering, trying to steady my nerves. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't let him know how badly I had been affected. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice strained. "I need to talk to you." I didn't know what to say. What was there left to say? We had already spoken. We had already fought, and nothing had changed. But I knew I couldn't shut him out. Not completely. "Jake, what's going on?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with a hurt creeping in. "I've been thinking," he began, his words slow and hesitant, "about everything. About what's happened. And I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you. And I don't know how to fix it." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't the first time he had apologized, but something about the way he said it this time made me feel like there was more behind it. More than just words. I wasn't sure if I could believe him, but I had to let him speak. "I don't know if there's anything you can do to fix it," I said, my voice softly breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. "You've made your choice, Jake. You've chosen her, and I've had to live with that. I've had to accept that I'm no longer the person you turn to. And that's something I'll never be able to forget." He was silent for a moment, and I could hear him breathing, trying to find the right words. "I understand," he finally said. "I know I've messed up. I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to fix. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about everything you said. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to make things right, but I want to try." I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. What could I say to him? What was left to say? "I've lost so much, Jake," I said softly. "And I don't know if I can ever get it back. You've hurt me in ways I can't even explain. And I don't know if you understand that. I don't know if you ever will." "I do understand," he said quietly. "Do. And I know I can't make up for what I've done. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm here, Mom. and I want to try to fix things, even if it's too late. I sat in silence for a moment, letting his words sink in. Could I forgive him? Could I even begin to trust him again? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I could ever feel the same way about him after everything that had happened. But as I sat there, I realized something. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I had finally said my piece. I had finally made him understand the weight of what he had done. I had finally stood up for myself, even if he couldn't fully comprehend the consequences of his actions. I don't know what the future holds, Jake, I said, my voice steady. But I do know that you need to figure out who you are without her. Without me. You need to find your way. I can't do that for you. And neither can she. He was quiet for a long time, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was soft and broken. Sorry, Mom. I don't know if I can make it right. But I want to try. I didn't respond. What else was there to say? The damage had been done, and there was no going back. But as I hung up the phone, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my son anymore. I was fighting for myself. I wasn't going to let them control my life any longer. I wasn't going to let the pain they caused define me. I had made my decision. I was done being a victim. I was done allowing them to strip me of everything I had worked for. It was time to move forward. And whatever came next, I was going to face it head on. No more waiting. No more hoping things would get better. It was time for me to take back my life. The days following my conversation with Jake were some of the longest I had ever endured. I had made my peace, or at least I thought I had. But with each passing moment, the weight of what had been said and done pressed on me. The silence that had followed was deafening, and the uncertainty lingered like a storm on the horizon. Jake had apologized, yes, but his words felt hollow. The damage had been done, and I wasn't sure if anything could fix it. His attempts to bridge the gap only reminded me of the distance between us. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet, and maybe not ever. The pain ran too deep. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself questioning everything. Could I ever get back the son I once knew? Could I ever forgive him for turning his back on me? And what about Emily? The woman who had come into our lives and torn it apart. She had never shown any remorse, never made any attempt to understand the depth of the hurt she had caused. To her, it seemed like it was just a matter of time before everything blew over. But it wasn't going to blow over. Not for me. I spent my time in solitude, reflecting on the years I had spent raising Jake. I thought about the sacrifices I had made, the choices I had made to ensure he had everything he needed. I thought about how I had always put him first above all else. And now, after all of that, I was nothing. I had been reduced to a stranger in his life, someone who had been discarded for a woman who didn't care about the love and devotion I had shown. The loneliness was overwhelming, but it wasn't just the emptiness of being alone. It was the emptiness that came from knowing that I had lost my son, not to another person, but to a choice he had made. And that choice had left me behind. But I wasn't going to stay in that place of sadness forever. I knew I couldn't. I had to take control. I had to rebuild. I started making changes. Small ones, but enough to help me move forward. I cleaned out the house, getting rid of the remnants of the life I had once known. The pictures of Jake and me from happier days, the family photos that had once filled the walls, all of it went into boxes. It felt like I was packing away a part of myself, but at the same time it felt freeing. I enrolled in a few classes. It had been a long time since I had done something just for me. I had spent so many years focusing on Jake, making sure he had everything he needed, that I had forgotten about my own dreams. Now I was reclaiming them. I took up painting again, something I had always loved but had put aside for years. I spent hours each day working on canvases, pouring my emotions into them. It wasn't just about creating art. It was about creating something for myself. Something that was mine, something that didn't involve Jake or Emily. I also started volunteering. Helping others gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sit around feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't going to wait for Jake to come back or for Emily to apologize. I had to keep moving forward, even if it meant leaving them behind. But there were days when the pain crept in again. Days when I would sit in the quiet of the house, the silence pressing in on me, and I would feel the loss all over again. I would wonder if Jake would ever come back, if he would ever understand the hurt he had caused. I would wonder if things could ever go back to the way they were. And then I would remind myself, it's too late for that. As the weeks passed, I began to feel stronger. I started finding my own voice again, the voice that had been silenced for so long. I was rediscovering who I was outside of being a mother. I was rediscovering my own worth. And slowly, I began to see a different future for myself. One that didn't involve constantly waiting for Jake to come around or hoping that things would magically get better. It was a future where I took control of my own happiness, where I didn't rely on anyone else for my sense of self-worth. But the road ahead was still uncertain. I didn't know if Jake would ever come back. I didn't know if Emily would ever acknowledge the pain she had caused. But I knew this. I couldn't keep waiting for them to fix things. I couldn't keep letting them control my life. I had already let go of so much. Now, it was time to let go of the hope that things could be fixed. It was time to embrace the reality that my life was going to be different, but that didn't mean it couldn't be fulfilling. I wasn't going to let the past define me anymore. I wasn't going to be a victim of their choices. I was going to live my life, and I was going to do it on my own terms. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The months that followed my conversation with Jake were some of the longest I had ever endured. I had learned to keep moving, even when the weight of what had happened threatened to pull me back. The days became routine. I focused on my new passions, painting, volunteering, and taking the time to finally breathe and heal. Each day was a little easier than the last, but there were still moments when the loneliness would creep in, when I would feel the absence of Jake so intensely it hurt. But I pushed through it. I learned to enjoy the quiet, to embrace the space I had created for myself. I had stopped expecting anything from Jake or Emily. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. And while the emptiness of their absence lingered, I found solace in the fact that I was learning to live without them. Then one evening as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick it up, the last thing I expected being a call from anyone related to Jake or Emily. But something told me to answer. "Mom," a familiar voice said after the second ring. My heart stopped. It was Jake. I froze, unsure of what to say. For a moment, the years of silence seemed to stretch between us, a vast and unbridgeable gulf that I wasn't sure I could cross. But his voice, strained and filled with something I couldn't place, was enough to pull me in. "I know it's been a while," he said, his voice quieter now. "But I need to talk to you. Please, can we meet?" I didn't know what to feel. There were so many emotions swirling inside me. Anger, relief, confusion, hope, but I couldn't let myself get caught up in them. Not again. Not without knowing if this was truly a turning point. "Jake, after everything, I'm not sure what there is to talk about," I said, my voice controlled, careful. "I understand," he replied. "But I've thought about this a lot and I know I messed up. I need to fix this, Mom. I need to fix what I've broken." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I've been trying to figure out how to make it right, but I don't know if it's too late. But I need to see you. Please." I couldn't bring myself to say anything right away. I had spent so long in this space of uncertainty, of pain, that the idea of opening that door again felt almost impossible. But I knew I had to decide. I couldn't keep running from it. "Where do you want to meet?" I finally asked, my voice steady but filled with the emotions I had buried for so long. He gave me a time and a place. A small cafe downtown, one that held memories of happier days. Felt like a lifetime ago, those days when I would meet him there for coffee, to talk about life, about his future. The idea of meeting him there now seemed almost surreal. "I'll be there," I said, and the line went silent before he finally spoke. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "Miss you." The words hung in the air long after the call ended. I sat there, phone still in hand, as a flood of emotions rushed through me. I had spent so many months convincing myself I was fine, convincing myself that I could live without him. But hearing him say those words, hearing the vulnerability in his voice, was like opening a door I had tried so hard to keep shut. I didn't know what would come from this meeting. I didn't know if Jake and I could ever fix what had been broken, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel the smallest flicker of hope. The next day I walked into the cafe, my heart racing. I had no idea what I would say to him, what he would say to me. Would we be able to bridge the gap between us? Could we find a way to move forward? Or was this just another painful chapter in a story that had already taken so much from us? I saw him sitting at a table by the window, looking older, different somehow, but still undeniably Jake. His eyes met mine as I approached, and for a moment everything stood still. There was so much unsaid between us, so much hurt and confusion. But in that moment, as I sat down across from him, I realized that this was it. This was the turning point. He didn't speak at first. Neither of us did. We just sat there staring at each other. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight of the past few years lift just a little. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom," Jake said quietly after a long silence. "I don't know if I can. But I want to try. I want to be your son again. I want to be the son I used to be." I took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. I had no idea where this path would lead. I didn't know if it was even possible for us to go back to what we had. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let the bitterness, the anger, the years of silence define me any longer. "We'll take it one step at a time," I said, my voice steady. "But you have to understand, Jake. It's not going to be easy. You hurt me. And it's going to take time to heal from that. But I'm willing to try. For both of us." His eyes filled with tears, and I could see the regret in his gaze. It was the first time I had truly seen him, really seen him, since everything had fallen apart. "I know," he whispered. "Sorry, Mom. I'll do whatever it takes." We sat there for a while longer, talking in fragments, slowly bridging the gap between us. There were still many things unsaid, many questions that lingered, but in that moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. The weeks following my meeting with Jake were filled with uncertainty. Our conversations, though tentative, began to grow more frequent. Every word he spoke seemed like a fragile step toward something I couldn't fully understand. There was still so much between us, so much pain, so much time lost. But something in me kept pushing forward, kept giving him the chance to show that he could still be the son I had raised. It wasn't easy. Never would be. I had spent so many months, so many years, locked in a prison of my own anger and hurt. And now I was expected to just open the door and let everything flood in again. It was terrifying. And it hurt. Every time Jake called, I could feel the weight of what he had done and the weight of my own decisions pressing down on me. I wanted to forgive him more than anything, but the past was heavy. The things he had said, the things he had allowed to happen, were not things I could just brush off. They were etched into my heart, like scars that never fully healed. And then there was Emily. She never reached out. I didn't expect her to, but I couldn't help but wonder why. She knew the damage she had caused. She had seen how she tore us apart. But she hadn't even tried to apologize. She hadn't even tried to make things right. She had allowed Jake to make his choices, and in doing so, she had made me an outsider in my own son's life. But in all of this, I had to face something difficult. The fact that forgiveness wasn't about her. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about me. I had to find a way to forgive, not for Jake's sake, not for Emily's sake, but for mine. I had always believed that forgiveness was something you did for the person who hurt you. That somehow, forgiving meant letting go of the pain they caused. But I had learned the hard way that forgiveness is not about erasing the hurt. It's not about forgetting. It's about releasing the hold that anger has over your life. It's about finding peace in your own heart. That's what I had to do. I had to forgive Jake not because he deserved it, but because I needed it. I needed to stop letting his mistakes control my life. I needed to stop letting the bitterness consume me. The decision wasn't easy. It wasn't something that happened overnight. But each day I took a step toward healing. I took a step toward letting go of the anger and the resentment that had built up over the past months. Jake and I continued to talk, slowly rebuilding the connection that had been shattered. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I was making the right choice, but there were also moments of tenderness. There were moments when he would say something that reminded me of the boy I once knew, the boy who had once turned to me for everything. I was learning to forgive him, but I was also learning to trust him again. Trust is a fragile thing, and it couldn't be restored in a single conversation. But I was willing to try. I was willing to give him the chance to prove that he could be the son I raised, the son who had once been my whole world. One evening, after a long phone conversation, Jake asked me if I wanted to meet again. This time he wanted to come to my house. He wanted to show me that he was serious, that he was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. I agreed. The idea of him coming home filled me with a mixture of excitement and dread. What would it be like to have him back? Would things ever feel normal again? Would I ever feel like the same mother I had been before everything fell apart? The day he came to visit, I found myself pacing around the house, unsure of what to expect. The last time he had been here, it had been under entirely different circumstances. There had been no apologies, no healing. But this time I could feel a shift. I could feel that he was trying, that he was genuinely sorry for what he had done. When he arrived, he stood at the door, unsure of how to enter. But when I opened it and saw him standing there, I felt something inside me stir. It was as if, for the first time in so long, I could see him clearly again. The boy I raised. The man he was becoming. Jake looked at me with tears in his eyes. His voice shaky as he spoke. I know I can't fix everything, Mom. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm here and I'm trying. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything in that single moment. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him, taking in the sight of my son, the man he had become, and the boy I had once held in my arms. I felt a mix of love and sadness, hope and fear. Finally I spoke. I don't know if things can go back to how they were, Jake. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take it one step at a time. He nodded, tears streaming down his face as he stepped forward and hugged me tightly. In that embrace, I felt the years of pain start to dissolve piece by piece. The walls that had separated us began to crumble. There was still a long way to go, still a lot to rebuild, but for the first time in a long time I felt like we were on the right path. And as I stood there, holding my son in my arms, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about embracing the future, about finding the strength to move forward, even when the past had hurt you more than you could imagine. I was learning that forgiveness wasn't a destination. It was a journey I wasn't going to take alone. The days after Jake's visit were filled with a quiet sense of relief. I had braced myself for another emotional storm, but instead, it felt like the calm after a long, turbulent season. The house didn't feel as empty anymore. The silence was no longer suffocating. For the first time in a long time I could breathe. Jake's visits became more frequent, and each time, the distance between us seemed to shrink just a little more. There was still so much to work through, so many things left unsaid, but we were getting there. He had proven with each passing day that he was willing to try, and that was all I could ask for. But as I spent more time with him, I realized something important. It wasn't just Jake who needed to heal. It wasn't just our relationship that needed to be repaired. I needed to heal too. I had spent so much time fighting, so much time holding on to the anger and the hurt, that I had forgotten what it meant to live without that weight. The truth was, I had been living in the past for so long, holding on to memories that no longer fit the person I had become. I was clinging to a version of Jake that didn't exist anymore. And in doing so, I had lost sight of the person I was. The mother I had been. The woman I had been before all of this started. It was time for me to let go of the past, not just for Jake's sake, but for my own. It was time for me to move forward, to embrace the future and all that it had to offer. I didn't know what that future would look like, but I knew it was mine to shape. One evening, as I sat in my studio working on a new painting, I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just the brushstrokes on the canvas that were healing me. It was the act of reclaiming my life, of creating something new from the pieces of the past. Every day, I was learning to let go of the hurt, to forgive myself as much as I had forgiven Jake. I was learning that forgiveness wasn't a gift I gave to anyone but myself. It was a gift I gave to my future. Jake came over that night, as he often did now. He sat down beside me as I worked. His presence no longer a source of anxiety but of comfort. We didn't always talk, but the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was a quiet understanding that we both were healing, that we both were moving forward in our own way. I paused in my painting and turned to look at him. He smiled, a small but sincere smile, and I realized that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I didn't need to force things to be the way they used to be. What mattered was that we were here, together, in the present. I didn't need to say anything. The look in his eyes told me all I needed to know. He was sorry. He was trying. And that was enough for me. "Mom," Jake said softly, breaking the silence, "I don't know what the future holds. But I'm glad you're still in my life. I don't want to lose you again." I set down my paintbrush and looked at him, my heart full. I didn't know what the future held either, but for the first time I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. Because no matter what, I had learned that I could stand on my own. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't a way to forget the past, but a way to move forward into a future where I could be at peace with who I was. "I'm not going anywhere, Jake," I said, my voice steady but filled with love. "We'll figure this out together. But I'm not waiting for things to go back to how they were. I'm moving forward. And you're welcome to come with me." He nodded, understanding the weight of my words. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't about going back to what had been. It wasn't about recreating a perfect past. It was about building something new, something stronger together. As I looked at my son, I knew that we had both changed. We had both grown. And while there were still scars from the past, there was also room for healing, room for a new kind of love. One that wasn't based on expectations or regrets, but on the present and the future. I picked up my paintbrush again and started to work on my painting, the quiet sound of the brush on canvas soothing me. Jake watched for a moment before standing up and walking toward the door. He didn't say anything as he left, but I didn't need him to. I knew we were both finding our way back to each other. Slowly but surely. I smiled to myself as I worked. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time I wasn't afraid of it. Because I knew that whatever came, I would be ready. I would take it one step at a time just as I had been doing. And for the first time in a long time I believed that I could make it through anything. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Thank you so much for watching. We truly appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave a meaningful comment below. Let us know your thoughts, and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. It means a lot to us to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more amazing content like this. And to all our returning subscribers, thank you for your continued support. We couldn't do this without you. Stay tuned for more exciting videos coming your way, and we'll see you in the next one.